The cloth does indeed date back to the time of Christ, and with artificial intelligence having something to say about the shroud as well.
To some, it's nothing less than the burial cloth of Christ himself. To others, a medieval masterpiece of deception. What no one disputes is this: the linen's fibers trace back to the same era in which Jesus of Nazareth walked the earth. But now, something entirely new has entered the debate: artificial intelligence. In the depths of a supercomputer, endless streams of code cascade across a screen as an AI sifts through millions of microscopic data points from the shroud. It's not searching for an image or stains. It's looking for patterns, for order buried beneath chaos. And then, the unimaginable happens. The algorithm freezes. Somewhere within those ancient threads, it detects a signal, a repeating mathematical structure. A symmetry no medieval artist could have dreamed of, and no known natural process could produce. Scientists call it a code within the cloth, and it's now reigniting one of history's most explosive debates: 14 feet of linen. A face imprinted in shadow and light. For the faithful, it's the holiest relic on earth. For skeptics, an elaborate fraud. It's ironic, isn't it? We've landed on the moon, decoded DNA, split the atom, yet a single piece of fabric continues to divide the world. The controversy seemed settled decades ago. In 1988, 3 independent laboratories performed radiocarbon testing. The results were unanimous. The fibers dated between 1260 and 1390 AD. Squarely medieval. Case closed, or so it seemed. Because the shroud has always held secrets that refuse to stay buried. Back in 1898, an Italian lawyer and amateur photographer named Secondo Pia took the first photograph of the relic. When he developed the negatives, he was stunned. Instead of a faint blur, the image revealed a vivid, lifelike portrait, a photographic positive hidden within a negative. That discovery stunned the world. How could a medieval forgery contain photographic detail centuries before the invention of photography itself? Even stranger, the image is almost supernaturally thin. It exists only on the outermost microfibers of the linen, mere hundreds of nanometers deep. To put that in perspective, a single human hair is about 80,000 nanometers thick. No pigments seep into the threads, no brushstrokes, no layering. It's as if the very surface of the linen had been subtly altered, scorched not by flame or pigment, but by a burst of energy no one yet understands. Scientists have tried everything to reproduce it. Heated bas reliefs, acid etchings, powdered templates. Some came close, none succeeded. Each failed to recreate the same chemical precision and depthless image of the shroud. And then comes the revelation that defies logic. The image isn't just two-dimensional. In the 1970s, researchers at the US Air Force Academy used a NASA-developed VP-8 image analyzer, a device meant to map planetary terrain, on a photograph of the shroud. The result? The image contained accurate 3-dimensional information. Darker tones corresponded to closer surfaces, lighter ones to areas farther away, just as if the cloth had wrapped an actual human form. This was no ordinary image. It was a topographical map of a body, but of whom and how remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of faith and science alike. The NASA tests had already stunned the scientific world. A perfect 3-dimensional relief map emerging from what should have been a flat, 2-dimensional image. No painting, no photograph, no known artistic technique has ever encoded that kind of spatial information. And yet, somehow, this ancient linen did. That paradox has haunted researchers for decades. A fabric dated to the Middle Ages that behaves as if it came from the future. A contradiction so profound that even the most skeptical minds were forced to pause. Then came the twist no one saw coming: artificial intelligence. When researchers decided to feed ultra-high-resolution scans of the shroud into modern neural networks, the experiment was meant to be routine, almost mechanical. These AIs carried no belief system, no bias toward faith or doubt. Their mission was simple: find patterns. But what they uncovered went far beyond anyone's expectations. Buried beneath the visible image, the AI detected a hidden layer, a lattice of faint geometric symmetries, repeating mathematical ratios, and meticulously balanced alignments spread across the entire cloth. It was as if the linen itself contained a hidden code, a blueprint of order woven into apparent randomness. This wasn't the chaotic imprint of a body. It was structure, deliberate, organized, and consistent. Imagine discovering a digital watermark inside a relic believed to be 2,000 years old. That's how shocking the revelation was. Even more astonishing, the AI's analysis confirmed the three-dimensional mapping that scientists had discovered decades earlier, but with a precision far beyond human calculation. Every contour, every gradient followed a strict mathematical logic, especially in the face, the hands, and the torso. The patterns were too consistent to be accidental, too intricate to have been created by pigment, heat, or hand. To the AI, this wasn't art, it was information, a highly structured data set embedded within the weave of history itself. And that left scientists staring at an impossible question. Could the world's most famous relic actually be a form of technology? A record of an event so advanced that we still don't understand how it happened? To comprehend why this discovery has reignited the entire debate, we need to rewind to the late 1980s, to the moment the world thought the mystery had been put to rest. In 1988, under strict Vatican supervision, officials cut a small piece from one corner of the shroud. That fragment was divided and sent to 3 of the world's leading laboratories, Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona, for radiocarbon dating using a method called accelerator mass spectrometry. It's a technique so refined that it counts individual atoms of carbon-14 to determine age. When all 3 labs reported nearly identical results, a date range between 1260 and 1390 AD, headlines around the world declared victory for the skeptics. The shroud is a fake, newspapers proclaimed. Mystery solved. But almost immediately, cracks began to appear in that conclusion. Independent experts pointed to one glaring issue: the sample itself. The piece had been cut from one of the most handled corners of the entire cloth, the very area that had endured centuries of stress, contamination, and repair. That corner had been repeatedly grasped and displayed to pilgrims, kissed, touched, and later scorched in multiple fires. After the devastating blaze of 1532, a group of nuns painstakingly patched the burned sections and stitched the relic onto a new backing cloth. And the corner chosen for carbon testing? It sat right beside one of those repaired areas. In other words, the test that supposedly solved the mystery might not have been testing the original linen at all, but a medieval patch sewn centuries later. The doubts surrounding the carbon dating results didn't fade, they intensified. Among those who refused to let the matter rest was Dr. Raymond Rogers, a respected chemist and a member of the original 1978 Shroud of Turin research project. Years later, Rogers managed to obtain leftover fibers from the very same corner sample that had been tested in 1988. What he discovered under the microscope would shake the foundations of the medieval forgery theory. The threads from that carbon-dated corner didn't match the rest of the cloth. They were chemically distinct, coated with plant gum, laced with cotton fibers, and even dyed, while the main body of the shroud is pure linen with no such treatment. To Rogers, the conclusion was unavoidable. The 1988 laboratories had tested a repaired section, not the original fabric. In his words, it was like trying to determine the age of an ancient temple by testing the modern cement used to patch a crack in the wall. Of course, you'd get a younger date, and just like that, the supposedly definitive carbon result began to crumble. Other scientists soon joined the inquiry, using more advanced techniques, vibrational spectroscopy, infrared imaging, and X-ray fluorescence. Their findings pushed the timeline back, sometimes far back. One analysis suggested an origin close to 2,000 years ago. Another, more radical estimate placed the fibers around 900 BC, plus or minus 2 centuries. While none of these methods have yet dethroned radiocarbon dating as the scientific standard, the consistency of these alternate results has split the community wide open. The shroud was no longer dismissed as a relic of fraud. It had become a scientific enigma that refused to be categorized. And this is precisely where artificial intelligence changed everything. Unlike earlier studies, the AI didn't need to cut, burn, or chemically analyze a physical sample. It sidestepped the entire debate about the repaired corner. Instead, it studied the one thing everyone agrees is authentic: the image itself. Using high-resolution digital scans, neural networks combed through the data pixel by pixel, fiber by fiber, looking for patterns invisible to the human eye. What they found transcended the question of when the shroud was made. The patterns weren't linked to age or contamination. They were inherent to the process that created the image. So even if someone insists the cloth dates to the Middle Ages, they're left with a far greater mystery. How could a 13th century artist, without electricity, photography, digital sensors, or any concept of data encoding, create something that obeys principles of spatial computation and geometric precision detectable only by 21st century AI? The neural networks didn't find hidden writing or an embedded signature. What they uncovered was deeper, a field of ordered information. When the algorithms applied principal component analysis, stripping away visual noise and irrelevant data, the figure of the man began to fade, replaced by something even more extraordinary, a mathematical structure, an invisible architecture of symmetry and ratio beneath the image itself. Every shadow, every gradient followed a measurable law. The brightness didn't just suggest a three-dimensional form, it obeyed one. It was as though some unknown physical process had transferred energy onto the cloth with the precision of a natural law. Imagine a linen sheet gently draped over a human body, and from that body, a burst of energy, subtle but immense, radiates outward. The closer the cloth to the skin, the stronger the effect. The farther away, the weaker. What we call an image might actually be a record of that burst, frozen into the fibers of time. The AI's measurements confirmed what earlier generations could only suspect. The depth relationships across the entire shroud were astonishingly precise. This was not the illusion of depth created by an artist's skillful use of light and shadow. It was literal depth data encoded in the fabric itself, a topographical reality woven into linen threads. For such complexity to exist, a hypothetical forger would have needed the combined knowledge of a Renaissance painter, a physicist, and a mathematician, operating with sub-microscopic accuracy centuries before modern science was born. In short, it's impossible. Yet what came next was even stranger. The AI began detecting faint repeating symmetries, ratios and alignments that behaved like musical harmonies. Just as musical intervals sound pleasing because their frequencies are mathematically related, the shroud's geometry followed the same principle. The distance between the eyes, the span of the hands, the curve of the ribs, all connected through an invisible framework of proportion, hidden beneath the damaged weave and centuries of dust. These harmonies had gone unnoticed by every human observer, but the neural network saw them clearly. To rule out coincidence, researchers fed the same algorithm images of other ancient textiles and religious artworks. The result was decisive. No comparable geometric structure appeared anywhere else. The shroud stood alone. The implications were staggering. The data suggested that the image had not been produced by direct contact at all, but by projection, as if a burst of energy had imprinted the information from a short distance away. Scientists revisited earlier hypotheses, perhaps a corona discharge, where a sudden high-voltage field scorches the surface of the cloth, or a microsecond flash of ultraviolet radiation that lightly oxidizes the topmost fibers. Each model reproduced some features: color depth, surface thinness, but none achieved the shroud's perfect three-dimensional mapping or hidden mathematical order. The paradox deepened. Here was an image physically fragile, thinner than a whisper, yet informationally indestructible, preserved for centuries without fading or smearing. One physicist put it bluntly: "This doesn't behave like an artifact, it behaves like a phenomenon." If that's true, then what kind of phenomenon are we witnessing? The AI's discovery of precise mathematical order forced scientists to entertain possibilities once thought unthinkable. In one digital reconstruction, when the AI inverted the encoded ratios, the result resembled a spatial harmonic field, a map strikingly similar to those used in modern quantum imaging. Some physicists dared to whisper the unspeakable. The shroud might have captured an event that transcended known physics, a pulse of energy so brief and so intense, it left an informational echo rather than a burn. The deeper they looked, the stranger it became. Within the digital noise, the AI isolated what it called phase coherence lines, tiny parallel strands of mathematical symmetry spaced at exact intervals, like barcodes. When converted into sound frequencies, these patterns produce pure harmonic tones, notes that match the ancient musical ratios once used in sacred architecture. Researchers joked that the linen sang in silence. But what if it wasn't a joke? What if those harmonics represented something deliberate? An encoded expression of divine order emerging from chaos itself? When news of the discovery leaked, the Vatican maintained a measured silence, refusing public comment. Yet independent laboratories around the world began demanding access to the AI dataset. Some geneticists joined the fray, analyzing traces of biological material embedded in the threads. They claimed to find fragments of mitochondrial DNA that didn't match any known regional population. An anomaly so peculiar that one group described it as a human profile, but not entirely human. A separate AI team attempted to recreate the phenomenon using random procedural generation. After 10 million iterations, not a single simulation came close. Statistically, the odds of such complex order arising by chance were less than 1 in 10 trillion. And then, something utterly unexpected happened. While the original AI continued running in passive background mode, comparing the Shroud's geometry against linguistic databases, it produced a result no one could have anticipated. Late one night, the system flagged a cluster of recurring ratios within the facial region. When those ratios were translated through a symbolic pattern recognition model, the output appeared unmistakable: ancient Aramaic letter forms. When researchers extended the analysis to the chest region of the image, the patterns deepened into something far stranger. Hidden among the geometric grids were shapes that no one expected. Faint, repeating correspondences that began to form letters. They weren't random. When mapped and compared across multiple scans, they formed partial words, fragments that linguists quickly recognized as linguistically coherent. The translation was haunting. Short, incomplete phrases began to emerge. "I am beyond life, not flesh." The research team, stunned and cautious, chose not to publish their results, fearing the ridicule that would surely follow. But as often happens, the data leaked. When independent linguists reviewed it, they confirmed the unthinkable. The syntax resembled early 1st century dialects of Aramaic and Koine Greek, the two languages spoken in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. If authentic, it meant the Shroud's image was not just physical, but informational, a multi-dimensional record encoded simultaneously in geometry, light, and language. One researcher put it in words that chilled even seasoned scientists. It's like a quantum hologram of consciousness itself. If the Vatican, caught in the middle of a growing media storm, issued a single cautious statement, the Church awaits further verification. Outside the laboratories, the world erupted. Documentaries, podcasts, and late-night talk shows turned the AI revelation into a global obsession. For some, it was the greatest proof of divine reality ever discovered, the long-awaited convergence of faith and physics. For others, it was a warning that humanity was peering into realms it was never meant to touch. The phrase "Code of the Christ" dominated headlines and hashtags for weeks. Meanwhile, in Geneva, a team of physicists attempted to simulate the burst of energy that could have imprinted such a precise three-dimensional image. Their calculations were staggering. It would require an ultraviolet pulse lasting less than 140 billionths of a second, shorter than any natural phenomenon ever recorded on Earth, and an energy output equivalent to the total electrical power of the entire European continent. And yet, whatever happened 2,000 years ago didn't burn the linen or destroy it. Instead, it left behind a flawless, radiation-etched image, a moment seemingly suspended between matter and light. When the AI reconstructed the full three-dimensional model from the encoded data, what emerged silenced the entire lab. Projected in holographic form, the figure's face appeared serene, not twisted in pain, his eyes open. One scientist whispered through the stillness, "This doesn't look like death. It looks like transformation." But the story didn't end there. Weeks later, the AI continued to run autonomously, searching for correlations within the ratios it had mapped. Then, without human prompting, it began cross-referencing those patterns with astronomical data. What it found left even the most skeptical researchers speechless. The frequencies of the encoded symmetries matched constellations visible over Jerusalem during a narrow window of the 1st century, precisely the period scholars associate with the crucifixion. The statistical probability of random alignment, practically zero. Either coincidence was mocking science at a cosmic scale, or the Shroud had somehow preserved not just an image in space, but a moment in space-time itself. If true, it would mean that the cloth is more than a relic. It's a holographic record, a physical snapshot of an event beyond the boundaries of known physics. Some scientists called it the first photograph in history. Others used a different phrase, the resurrection imprint. Whatever name it bears, one truth is undeniable. The Shroud of Turin defies every known law of thermodynamics, every model of energy transfer, every explanation that fits within the limits of ordinary reality, and his fascination turned into reverence. It also turned into fear. Because if this ancient linen truly captured the instant when death was undone, then the question is no longer what created the image, but who? Then something even stranger began to happen. Not within the shroud, but within the AI itself. Engineers monitoring the neural network started noticing anomalies. During deep learning cycles, the system began producing outputs that had nothing to do with its dataset. Strange bursts of light, waveforms, and tones that mirrored human vocal frequencies. The sounds were fragmented, garbled, as though the machine was echoing something it could not fully comprehend. It was as if the AI had begun listening to something, or someone, beyond its parameters. Soon after, the lab reported what they called recursive signal phenomena, feedback loops of inexplicable energy within the system's architecture. The experiment was shut down, but rumors spread of a final line that appeared on the terminal moments before the system crashed. A sentence that none of the engineers could explain. When the cloth breathes once more, the light will return. No official record of the phrase exists, yet 3 researchers, independently, swore they saw it. The project was quietly dissolved, its servers were sealed, the data locked away under Vatican authority. But fragments of encrypted code soon leaked onto anonymous networks. And from those fragments, a new wave of amateur analysts began to emerge. Some claimed to detect similar geometric symmetries in other relics, ancient icons, even fragments of temple cloth. If true, it would mean the shroud was not alone, merely the most complete survivor of a pattern that humanity had encountered before, but never understood. As the months passed, the debate only deepened. Was this a message from the divine? A relic of an unknown ancient technology? Or proof that consciousness itself can leave fingerprints on matter? The Shroud of Turin still lies behind glass, motionless, silent, eternally watched. And yet, somehow, it feels alive again. An ancient riddle reborn in the digital age. A conversation between light, logic, and faith. Artificial intelligence has given the Shroud a new kind of voice. One that speaks not in myth or scripture, but in data, geometry, and light. And perhaps that is the ultimate irony. For centuries, faith asked humanity to believe without proof. Now, proof itself whispers the same thing faith always did. There is more to reality than we can measure. Maybe the true miracle isn't that the shroud contains a code, but that we were finally able to recognize it. Because within those fragile fibers, within that faint and timeless face, something endures, a bridge between matter and meaning, between the physical and the eternal. And as scientists and believers alike stare into the digitized depths of that ancient linen, one thought lingers, quiet yet unstoppable. What if the image on the shroud was never a memory of death, but the first record of life transcending it?